If you want to learn more about fractional CFO services and Ascent, you're in the right place. If you don't, it's still going to be interesting. I promise. I know it doesn't sound like CFOing might be interesting, but it's super exhilarating, especially if you're a CFO and you can help founders do all the things that we do. And I don't want to steal a thunder, but welcome. Super excited to be the moderator of this forum. My name's Adam Smith. I am a fractional CFO here at Ascent CFO. And I want to go through a couple of sponsors and then I'll introduce the panel. Any questions before we start? No? I didn't even try to be funny. I don't even know what I did. This is going to be good. Wait till I try. Okay. So no questions at this point. We will have a pretty lengthy Q&A session. We'd love to answer some probing questions that you have, things that you want to see, maybe something you're struggling with. Maybe you're like, does fractional CFO even make sense for you at this point? So we've got a lot of open-ended questionnaire time at the end. And we've really just want to talk about what we do, maybe, and introduce these lovely folks. So we'll just go there. So first, we'll go through a couple of slides that they make me do at DSW. Thank you, Amazon, presenting sponsor, all the title sponsors. Truly appreciate all the sponsorship. This is a pretty nice space in here. And so thank you for this attorney's firm. Other headline sponsors, member sponsors, and partner sponsors. All good? In case you don't, you need to really talk into this isn't going to work. This is going to work, okay? Perfect. Again, Adam Smith. I'd like to introduce Dan DeGolier, Caroline Creidenberg, Jodi Mercer, and Licis. And I'd love for all of you, I'm going to skip Caroline for just a second, but the rest of you to give a brief introduction and who you are, what you do.
Can you guys hear me? I apologize up front. I'm kind of losing my voice. Great timing, I know. But I'm Dan DeGolier, the founder and CEO of Ascent CFO Solutions. I started the firm in 2011, and I'll go into our story a little bit later.
I'm Jodi Mercer. I'm a fractional CFO with Ascent. Been there for about 5 years. Done all kinds of startups, CPG, construction, professional services, you name it. So run the gamut of the startup world.
I'm Licis. I'm a fractional CFO. I've been with Ascent for 4 months now. I have 25 years of investment banking, corporate development experience, mostly with startups and growth stage companies. And I've worked across a variety of industries, including SaaS and renewable energy.
Perfect, thank you. And Caroline, I'm going to introduce you a little bit differently. Caroline is a client of Ascent, and I think this introduction will speak for itself here.
First in the tank is a modern way to celebrate your union.
Hi, Sharks. My name's Caroline Creidenberg. I'm from Denver, Colorado, and I'm here today seeking $200,000 for 5% of my company.
Wow.
Sharks. Weddings are amazing, right? A beautiful couple, madly in love, shedding happy tears together. But what happens when the unexpected makes everything come crashing down? I'm talking about the pandemic. Life was brought to a halt and couples were forced to postpone or cancel their big day. So what did I do? I created the ultimate solution to allow couples to still tie the knot and live happily ever after. Introducing Wedfuly, the best wedding you'll ever go to. But get this, guests can attend all from the comfort of their home, hot tub, or anywhere around the world. Wedfuly helps plan and produce elaborate, engaging, creative, and virtual, yes, Sharks, I said virtual, weddings. We handle the tech so that our couples can handle the love. But this is...
So Caroline,
Hi.
hello. I'd love to, I know you're more than Shark Tank, but first, could you introduce yourself? And I've got a few questions for you.
Yes, my name's Caroline. I'm from Denver, Colorado, and I'm here today. No, my company is Wedfuly, obviously. Shark Tank is my claim to fame, but I started Wedfuly 2017. Attended a lot of Denver Startup Week events back then, and I'm an Ascent client and excited to kind of share my story.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. The obvious question, which has nothing to do with CFOing, is I still have to know, what was it like to be on Shark Tank?
That's like a loaded question,
Oh, yeah?
But it was really fun. I tried to embrace the fact that it was a TV show and not take it too seriously. So it was actually super fun to like go to LA, and I had like hair and makeup in a trailer, and I was like super cool for like an hour, and then they just dump you on the side of the street and are like, good luck. But it's really fun, and I'm like a curious person, so get to see the back end of something that you like watch on TV and hear so much about was kind of the fun part for me. And obviously this video lives on forever, and this re-airs all the time, and I'll get texts from friends being like, you just showed up on my TV screen. So that's kind of interesting to say the least, but overall, like, incredible experience and would do it again.
Thank you. Obviously, the pandemic impacted all of us in profound ways. Our businesses saw increase, and some we had to say goodbye to, and most of us had to make major pivots. So I'd love to hear, like, what was that like, where you've got a plan, and plans changed.
Yeah, so a little bit of background. I started it in 2017, and it was virtual wedding planning. Very brief, like I started it right out of college, wide-eyed, bushy tail, had no idea what I was getting into, and we were hyper-local business model, had launched in Denver and Kansas City. We're doing like very small amount of revenue each month, and the pandemic hit, and I was like, this is the sign from above to shut it down. It was a great go, and I was on a hike and was like, what if we live streamed a wedding? What if I could partner with Zoom? Like, that would be cool for press. It'll get us through the like 2 weeks that COVID will be. And we did one. I like reached out to like 50 couples on Facebook through these wedding groups, and I was like, hey, can we live stream your wedding with Zoom? Like, we're partnering with Zoom. Had not talked to Zoom yet. And one couple was like, yeah, we're like in a pinch. We're trying to get married still on March 16th, or maybe it was March 18th. And so I was by myself at that point, just working with like a team of contractors. And so I called my friend who worked at Zoom and was like, I don't know how to use Zoom. Can you like run this wedding? And so we did our first wedding. I put together a press release. Somehow Zoom responded and said they would collaborate with us. And that press release kind of took off like wildfire. So we got picked up in Vogue, New York Times, Washington Post, and that led to like thousands of inquiries. And so I kind of was like, well, people are banging at the door, like, let's do this. So we did 50 free weddings, and kind of through those weddings realized like there's an actual business model here post-COVID as well. We had a lot of couples reaching out who like they didn't have a wedding plan to begin with. They were kind of like, this just sounds really fun and wacky, and like we don't want to deal with our family drama, so we're just gonna do this. And that was like chaos. We kind of joke internally, we like caught lightning in a bottle at the time, and we kind of just ran with it. And so it was probably like April 2020 that the light bulb really went off, and it was like, okay, there's a full demographic of couples that the wedding industry really doesn't service who want to do something honestly a little bit wacky and different. So we kind of ran with it. I hired a team very rapidly and had a lot of fun growing, and we had, this whole sector of couples whose weddings were disturbed by the pandemic and needed us, and then this whole other, we call them our Plan A couples, who just were like, screw it, let's get married this way. And it was just this like magical, weird product market fit that we kind of obviously fell into, but then really like ran with it.
Perfect, thank you. I so much respect for entrepreneurs in general when it's just life happens, and then you see the market and the lightning in the bottle. So this is a great story. I am curious how, sounds like a lot of change. You also got pretty lucky on making that phone call, almost prophetically speaking. I love that. And when did you know, when did you know you needed support, and maybe specifically around CFO, fractional CFO support? What was that like?
So I live in a world with a lot of accountants, and my brother is an accountant, and he was doing our journal entries, which meant whenever he had a minute every quarter or so, which meant our books were very messy. And when we were a little bit smaller and it was just me and there wasn't like payroll for other employees, like that was fine. But Dan and I had met before the pandemic. I had gotten introduced. We had like a really great conversation. And I want to say like, I don't remember when I was like, I need help. But I kind of realized that the financials were not something that were my strong suit. So my background's software engineering. I can handle like the PR side, a lot of the creative side, that part, but like financials were really something that were not my strong suit, and so I knew it made sense to find someone who could pick up those pieces, and so I reached back out, I don't really remember when, and we started to just work with Cindy, who's in the audience, shout out, and kind of clean up our books because they're pretty big mess from the previous 3 years of running the company, and really started to lean into like cleanup phase first. And so I'll definitely, I feel like, get more into when we really needed a lot more support. But I knew pretty quickly, like, this is something I don't want to mess around with. I know it'll take a lot of untangling if we keep waiting. And also money was like coming in very quickly, and I definitely needed to be responsible with it in terms of how to run the business. So it was pretty like right when we started to get a bunch of like money coming through the door, like I needed support.
Great, thank you. So money coming through the door, I know that's like that for me. That's music to my ears. It's like, all right, we got something to work with. Let's do this. Dan, and if you can speak to maybe go a little bit more into the weeds here about what we did for Wedfuly and Caroline, like what services maybe did we provide?
Yes. So starting out with the financial cleanup, there was a need to get the books in a GAAP basis and accrual basis because before we could start to forecast the cash. And so then I think we started digging into the different pricing models, the different ways to set up the different customer packages, and then starting to forecast what the cash flow would look like. Because I think with any company that's starting to scale, whether you're raising outside capital or whether you're bootstrapping, you've got to start. You've got to really understand what those cash flow cycles are, and that's, I think, something we helped you with pretty early on was starting to model out those different scenarios, what that might look like as you were considering different pricing packages for the couples and things like that.
Yeah, and we didn't raise like any venture capital, so it was all customer dollars that were like funding our journey. And so like having a stronghold on the cash flow is really important, and we kind of learned the hard way that weddings are a seasonal business, and we kind of took the bet that like, oh well, we're not servicing the traditional wedding couples, so like winters aren't going to be slow for us, which was wrong. And so we had to learn the hard way of like, we had hired full-time team members to essentially be the coordinators for these weddings, and they were on like salary payroll, and when the winter hit we were like bleeding cash. And so having, at the time, like I didn't have the tools in my toolkit to know that or foresee that and model that out, so like it caused a lot of, I would say, emotional distress, because then we had to do restructuring and layoffs, and like that's not fun, obviously. And so that's when too I kind of doubled down. Like at first it was like, oh my gosh, money's coming in. We like have more money than we know what to do with. Like we had to pay taxes for the first time, and that's when we switched to accrual because it made more sense. And like I didn't know how to do any of that. I was like just blind, leading my team of blind. So like having them there was helpful. And then, you learn things the hard way, but like we kind of talked about, and I'm sure we'll touch on, like the less you can get down that rabbit hole, and then have, like if I didn't have to go through a lot of those, bleeding cash doing layoffs, like that was a huge distraction for our team in a lot of other ways. It was obviously a really good learning experience, but if I had pulled in people to help me earlier, I probably might have avoided some of that, not all of it, because you can't avoid all the distress while running a startup, but yeah.
Perfect, thank you. I think I'm going to have a couple of more ending questions here. The question I always ask or want to know in Shark Tank is what happened after Shark Tank, and then And if you'd be so kind, what are you up to now?
Yeah, so we took a handshake deal on TV with Robert, and you do a bunch of due diligence ahead of time, which was very helpful to have Cindy and the team do that for me, so I could focus on just showing up to Shark Tank and presenting. And we decided, and then you go through another round of due diligence after, and we both kind of decided it wasn't a great fit and parted ways. So I didn't actually collect the money behind the scene or go forward with it, but it was still an amazing experience, and obviously the press that you get from it is incredible and unmatched. And am actually very excited to announce, I guess, formally for the first time publicly that I actually sold the business on August 1st. So as of September 1st, I'm now a corporate gal working for someone else.
Awesome. Congratulations. Really, that's a great story. I'd like to transition now into more Ascent background. Dan, you founded Ascent a few years ago, and maybe you could tell us when and why and how.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So started, I was working with a publicly traded software company as their head of finance for the Americas region. It's an Australian software company. It was a long commute for me, and I had taken a role with an early stage company because they were raising their first round of venture capital. It seemed like it was a great fit for me, and I stepped into that role and realized right away they couldn't really afford a full-time CFO, and I wasn't really doing CFO work all week long. I was taking a CFO salary, but I was the whole accounting department, I was the HR department, I was the IT department, and that was my light bulb moment that it would be really interesting if I could be the CFO for more than one company, if I could spread my salary around, my cost around to several people. And so once I had that light bulb moment and started doing that in 2011, on a single shingle basis, I would work with 4 or 5 companies at a time, doing all the things CFOs do, building financial models, helping them raise capital, all those types of things. And then in 2015, I had a full plate, and I kept having people reach out to me for more help, and I wasn't able to do that myself, so I started adding teammates. Fast forward, and we're now 37 employees. 16 of us are fractional CFOs and VPs of finance, and the rest are controllers, accounting managers, financial analysts, senior accountants, things like that. So, we help companies with raising capital and with financial modeling and handling all the accounting support. So anything that you would typically look for in a CFO at a company, we're doing on a part-time basis, kind of by the bite. We provide what you need when you need it.
Thank you. Perfect. I think I just want to highlight a couple more on Ascent, and then we'll go into more of the panel. 90 plus clients now. I think we'll hit 100 certainly by the end of the year, and the various industries. I know we cover more than these, but this is kind of our.
These are some of our larger sectors. A lot of us have background in SaaS, so a lot of technology background, technology clients. Professional services, e-commerce, real estate, construction. Lately, more and more healthcare is a sector that we're focusing on as well. Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, this is our last chart, so we're going to get into the Q&A in a minute, or in about 5 minutes. But this is more of a conversational chart. I'm curious. You can see we have pre-seed, seed, early stage, growth, and exit. And I'm going to take a poll here. And if you are in the early pre-seed and/or provide services to pre-seed entrepreneurs, I'd love to see your hands just to get an idea of where you're at. So pre-seed, a lot of pre-seed, about 12, 15. All right, and now in the seed stage, where you're at, not as many, got 4 or 5. Good. Early stage, that's a steady stream of revenue, growing working capital, about 10. Great. And in growth stage, you're scaling. Got it. Perfect. Pretty well distributed. And who's working on exits right now besides? Yes, you can. You've definitely multiple, yeah, for sure. Exits can happen at any time. You can always raise more money. It's certainly, they're not mutually exclusive. So what I'd like to go now is start to go into our panelists, and I'll start with you, Maris, and just an open-ended question. weird question, I'm sure, but what lights you up as a fractional CFO? What are you working on? What are you doing?
What lights me up? So I started my career with two very large entities, Royal Bank of Canada and Wells Fargo, and I quickly realized I'm not a big company guy. So what lights me up is working with innovative entrepreneurs and helping them through their entrepreneurial journey. So for me, it's helping guide them through the complexities of corporate finance. And I love being in a room with tech people and with engineers and marketing people where I sit there and I go, I'm the stupidest person in this room. How did I get here? But everything comes around, and then I realize that I'm that fit and I'm that skill set that these people don't have. I love being challenged by CEOs. I'm working with a SaaS startup now, and the CEOs challenge me to think innovatively, outside the box, creatively in terms of setting up the cap table, in terms of how we raise capital, and as importantly, making sure that whatever we do today doesn't prevent us from growing tomorrow. So not going too deep into that rabbit hole. So it's really preparing the company and addressing its needs now, but being very mindful of what challenges we're going to face in the future, and to make sure we're not handcuffed doing that. So I have a SaaS client. I also have an oil and gas services client up in Wyoming, so that's very different work. And then I have a regulatory writing client out in Seattle. So for biotech companies that have to get approved, they do all the outsourced writing, and I'm helping them develop a SaaS model for their offerings also. So every day it's new challenges, but that's also what gets me pumped up. There's always a challenge, and I work with incredibly smart people to help solve those. So that's what I love.
Thanks. What I'm hearing is a lot of diversity and possibly some decent amount of ADHD that fits your, that makes you really tick and get you up in the morning.
Going from SaaS tech in the morning to oil and gas services in the afternoon, you gotta, yeah.
That's good. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, Jodi, similar question. And is your life as diverse as Maris's? I'm curious.
Yep. It is. I can totally relate. I'm with a CPG company at one point, then I'm with a professional services company, then I'm with an isometric testing company an hour later, and you actually have to sit there and think, who am I talking to, and what are their issues? Okay, yeah, that's it. That's who I'm talking to. So I love that part, though. I was 10 years with a Fortune 100 company running a $4 billion unit from finance perspective, and what I realized is I really enjoy being with the operational folks. I really enjoy being with the salespeople, with the operators, and the farther you went up in the company, the less I talked to those people. So being with Dan's company, I get to speak to startups and operational people and salespeople and customer service and whoever it may be. And I think really what I enjoy is when the light bulb goes on. You can almost see the switch go on in somebody's head when I have a customer right now that I've been working with that they were spending double what they expected to in their cost of goods. When you pointed that out, and their jaw dropped. I mean, they didn't even realize it, but the stress that was putting on their working capital and on the entire company was palpable. And sitting down with them and being able to say, okay, now let's talk about how we control that. And each week we go through it, and now it's under control. They can see it, they understand it, they can forecast it, and it's completely changed their trajectory and what they're now trying to bring on board in terms of sales. So that's what I enjoy.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to introduce myself too, because I'm not only moderating, but I am a fractional CFO, and I actually get pretty excited about doing the work too. So I'm just giving you a couple of quick stories, but get your questions ready because I'd love to hear from you, and you could call on anyone here. I'll just tell you one thing that's really cool right now is I got called by a client because their current CFO was struggling. First-time CFO, much younger person than me, and had the analytical piece, but was missing the leadership element. And I got called 4 months ago now, and I've been working with this younger CFO, and it's a mentoring, And now they want to buy a company. So now I went to New York last week to try to look at their target and see if that made sense. And actually, I want to look at 3 different targets. 2 do not make sense. 1 does. And I think for me, my heart, much like Maris, is with the entrepreneur. But I know that a lot of entrepreneurs can't afford a full-time CFO. And that is, so I either go big in corporate or I find a way to get down into the roots. And fractional's the way that I've found to get to the one-on-one, to be in the trenches with the CEOs, where they can be very vulnerable and intimate with their financials and their business model and the risks, and they can be safe and have an advisor. And it's not just a therapist, it's a financially minded individual that has best practices, that's been working at IBM and investment banking and the most powerful institutions out there, down into the weeds. And so that's what I love, that we can get to you as an entrepreneur. So.
And can I piggyback?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because
yeah.
I think like from the entrepreneur's seat, it sometimes feels like you're like in an ocean and there's like, you don't know what knobs to turn to make what difference. And for us, it was like we needed to stop the burn and like lower it. But having someone to help point out, like you were saying, like you may have this idea of this is where your cost of goods, what your cost of goods are. But actually when we like have the P&L and we look at this and we boil it down and we do pricing, like that's not true. And so that is like helpful to then know what like me and my advisors talk a lot about like the levers, and everyone's heard that probably, like what lever can I twist or pull to make a difference. And like from the founder's seat, like that is very muddied. Like you're in it day to day, you're working on it, especially early on. Like you're just trying to like not have this client blow up with you tomorrow, or like not have this wedding go to shit tomorrow. Like you're very in the weeds with that. So like when I like felt like a grown up kind of when we brought Ascent in, because it was like pulled me out and was like, you can still like focus on that stuff and that is your responsibility, but also you need to start like looking from a 500-foot view. And like we and something that we kind of really wanted to touch on is like with Ascent is it's really important that they're not just a service provider, but they kind of become part of your team because they want to work with you on the problem. They can't solve the problem without you. Like I think that's a blanket statement for like being a founder in general. You're never going to be able to like, I'm outsourcing this fully because like, I'm sorry, they don't live in your brain. Like, so having like Cindy, we literally have a Slack emoji for Cindy on our team because we love Cindy and she helps solve a lot of problems we can't. And we had like at our, we had a monthly stand-up where she would come present the numbers so that the team understood like, these are too high. We need to get this number down. We need to like sell more weddings or, so having them really integrate into the team has been a huge help. And like, that's that falls on you too as the entrepreneur. Like they can provide their service, but you have to make sure that you are working with them towards the problem. They're not just going to blanket solve any like problem because it's your company and they need to be embedded with you and help you. And like, that's what Ascent does a really good job of.
And there is therapy.
That's optional. Do we charge for that? No. Different rate? No. Okay.
No, Caroline said that really well. We've clients where absolutely our best engagements is where we are brought under the umbrella. We're part of the team. We integrate ourselves as part of the team. One extreme is they just say, "Oh, do you handle everything?" That doesn't work. And the other one is where, well, it's a need-to-know basis, and we're going to piecemeal things to you. To have a really successful engagement with a fractional CFO, you need to think of them as your CFO on your team. They just happen to be part-time.
And like your financials are a little bit of a scary thing. Like it's kind of like airing out your dirty laundry sometimes. Like especially early on, you can be like, I was always embarrassed. Like if we were spending too much here, or we were like not making enough money. Like it's a hard thing to open the door to, but like it's not helpful to keep that door shut or to like give only snippets. Like they're not gonna judge you. They're here to help you.
And it's this whole therapy thing. It's really funny. My oil and gas services client is on a kickoff call and is with the whole management team. And I was trying to get to what are your strategic priorities and what's a deliverable or deliverables that I can help with. And about halfway through the call, I said, do you know what we need? We need a brain dump from the founder. And everyone on the team goes, oh my God, Maris, yes. So I literally scheduled a call on Zoom called Kent Brain Damage Extraction Call. And I did 3 hour-long calls. And all this stuff came out of his brain, and his management team was like, we've been trying to get that out of his head for years. So it's not always digging into the numbers, but it's working at that strategic level to help them think, forward thinking also.
Perfect, thank you. And it is not just strategic, but that's where the major value is. But obviously, I think we had a chart here. We have another 15 controllers, accounting managers, to do some of the, I'd say, day-to-day operations, accounting operations as well. And so very often we'll have a team. Sometimes it's a CFO-only engagement. Sometimes a CFO controller, accountant, and we're doing, you've outsourced your entire accounting to Ascent. That's possible too. So, all right. Any other comments before we start taking questions? All right. Yeah, lots of questions. I'll start with this gentleman here.
The old guy?
Yeah.
So I've got a strong financial background, been a fiduciary, publicly traded companies, all this stuff. We're raising money now. When do we bring it in? Does having you involved while we go out and ask for money show that we are being responsible?
Absolutely. I think it validates what you're doing. You may have a good sense of your current financial status, your numbers and everything, but we do a lot of prep work with our clients, help them put themselves in the investor's shoes, because a lot of us have been through that both on the buy side and the sell side. So they know their business the best, but it's how you tell that story, and a lot of it is marrying the numbers to the story and the story to the numbers in a way that investors like to digest things, and that could make all the difference in the world. So we always say the earlier the better, even when you're prepping for it.
So you'll take options?
Talk to Dan, but I personally would, yes.
Plus,
We do. It's uncommon, but we do. Yeah.
They're very well connected.
It depends.
It depends. Yeah. Great question. Lady in the black behind.
Okay, so I think the role of CFO changes a lot according to the stage of the company.
Yeah.
So I'm curious whether each one of you focuses on a specific stage and what happens when the company graduates. Like, is your goal to kind of make them independent and like get them to the point where they can just have full-time CFO dedicated to them, or like what's your model there?
So that's a great question. So the question is around the evolution of a company and what the CFO's role is throughout that evolution. So there was a slide that we had up a couple of minutes ago, and that slide kind of showed those different stages. So we definitely, a fractional CFO or a full-time CFO or full-time accounting people will have different roles as you go through this trajectory from sort of raising your first round of capital to scaling revenue to eventually maybe having an exit. And so we find that we will staff that company depending upon what the needs are. So we might start out with a senior accountant and a CFO with a little bit of oversight. Then they reach another level, and now you need more CFO oversight because you're starting to raise capital. You're starting to, the new board of directors requires different types, more KPI reporting and things like that. And so it's definitely an evolutionary process, and the thing is you can scale up and down with your team because you've got different resources available to you at different rates.
And to answer it in a different way, I would say that very often a CFO will stay with in the initial phases all the way through exit. And the nice thing is we've got 16 other CFOs on the bench. So if this is the nice thing about going to a firm as opposed to a single person, okay? If I didn't feel comfortable in an M&A deal, for example, I can just go to my team and go, hey, I'm ready to transition, or can you just bring this person on for the M&A? I'm going to stay on the operation side because that's what I really like doing. So we'll bring on someone on an ad hoc basis. That's the nice thing as opposed to being the solo person and going, I guess I got to figure it out because I really don't have a team. And that, I think that's where I gravitate towards working for a firm as opposed to being on my own, because I have so many resources and I don't have to fake it. And really, I don't want to fake it. I want to be the best at what I'm doing, and if I'm not, I want the best for my client. Thank you for that question. Up in front here, yeah.
So my question is, I know that you prepare companies for receiving investment. you also have a Rolodex of investors where you make introductions.
Get asked that question all the time. Who wants to take that?
So, I mean, although we do have a number of investors in our contacts, I've always cautioned people, don't hire us because you think that we're going to raise capital for you. We're going to be there to support you. We're going to help you with the pitch deck. We're going to help you with the financial model. We can possibly make some introductions, but we're not investment bankers. We're not here to. That's not our primary function to make the introductions.
And I've worked with a lot of investors where we use, it depends on what stage you're in as well. If you're doing friends and family, we probably can handle that without an investment banker. We're much cheaper than investment banks. So that's what we try, really let's try to do it ourselves. And if it's bigger, the bigger market, need more money, it all depends, then we can bring in some more support. I want to go on this side. This gentleman here with the glasses. Yep.
Are you able to provide assistance in a situation where you're bootstrapped to the point where you're at, gas tanks on low, but the first step out from there that you're making is a request for funding on the order of several millions of dollars, and don't have anyone in the group that has the financial CFO type of experience, but that doesn't mean that in your deck you still need the projections, and for whether it's grants, whether it's VC, it doesn't really matter what it is, you still have to have budgets that make sense, things you can backstop that aren't, you're fully fictitious at one point, but we know if you're moving into this, you're backstopping all your budget numbers, and kind of just need to get all that stuff in order so that, when you're making those requests, it's obvious that, the number you're asking for, it's a legitimate number. You know why you use it. But you're not, you can't run out and hire somebody. It's just tough usually. So
Yeah, I would say we've done that on a project basis. We would do that, on a project. Yes, you wouldn't necessarily be your ongoing CFO at that moment. You just need somebody to help you bulletproof that pitch deck and ask the questions and say, why do you think that? Why is that your assumption? What's the KPI that's behind that? And go through that just like an investor would, because that's really what you're looking for, is somebody to bulletproof you in front of the investors. And we do that. Right.
Yes,
Exactly.
like EBITDA or EBITDA or whatever.
We like calling that creative rather than fictitious. You just need to have defensible assumptions. So that's creativity. That's not fiction.
I want to add a little bit, just because of the experience I've had in these rooms with entrepreneurs and CFOs. Investors, many investors, are they're very keen. They sense things. They can see things. They ask questions a certain way, and they ask it. So they can tell if you know what you're talking about, how deep and how granular how real is your business model. And I just cringe when I've seen some folks who didn't know what they were talking about, and it was really obvious to the investors. So I like to try to, bulletproof might be a good word. Actually, it's a really good word because they're tough in there. It's their money. So I highly recommend it. Project basis works. You don't have to have us there for 6 or 12 months. We can come in there on a project basis, sure. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm a fractional chief operating officer, and I work right alongside usually it's a full-time CFO wearing 9,000 hats. So I'm happy to always take a little bit off of their plate. Because you're not there full-time, have you had the challenge of reminding them that you are part of their team? You're embedded, and you have to remind internal leadership that leave the CEO alone. Let them go raise, let them do strategy, let them go do new things, while you've got someone in operations that runs the day-to-day, and you've got someone in the financial space where we work together to make that better. Have you run into that, and how do you overcome it?
It depends. Yeah, I mean, there's certain situations like that where some clients almost want to pull you in too much.
That's what I was gonna say. I thought you were going there, and I thought it's the opposite. It's like, no, I'm only part-time. I can't do it.
They don't recognize that you have other clients.
But here your questions have flipped the other way. Sorry to interrupt.
So it can go any direction. Other times, yes, like this is my role. And here's my availability, and here's what you should expect from response times. Kind of to a point earlier that Jodi was making, I think it's important that there's certain people who are really good at the role, right? You can be a very qualified CFO or very qualified controller, but it takes a special kind of communicator and a special type of DNA to be able to be fractional, because you have to be able to do that mode switching quickly, right? You're going to switch from SaaS to oil and gas to CPG, and so it takes kind of a special type of that. So special kind of person. And so you have to communicate expectations very clearly with your clients as far as how quickly, you can't close 10 clients' books by the 5th day of the month, right? You've got to have expectations, and there's kind of a give and take as far as when you're going to be responding, what sort of method of communication you're using.
But you need to remind them that you are part of the team. Please include me so that you're informed when you're trying to close the books. Yeah. You don't get blindsided when you are trying to close the books, or you've got something that fell apart, and then you find out about it 5 or 6 days later, and you've got money leaking.
It does happen, no doubt.
Well, I think what helps me is I set up meetings with the CEO and hopefully the staff as well on a very cadenced, if it's every Monday, if it's every other Monday, if they have a staff meeting every week or every month or whatever it is, make sure you're in that. Because otherwise, things happen, they go away, and you find out on the back end.
I mean, we right from the beginning, we stress this is a partnership. We're part of the team. One of my clients, the SaaS client, first day basically said they have outsourced bookkeeping and accounting, and those people are reporting to me, and I'm help them implement all of our systems and everything else. So I'm in the trenches there. I think if we have to continue reminding people, or we feel like we're getting siloed, then that's a discussion that we have.
Great question. I'm going to go over here. Yes.
Specifically for Jodi, I have a CPG company about 2.5 years. We're doing cash-based discounting right now. What triggers do you look for that it's time to move to an accrual basis?
Usually it's a tax reason you want to be on accrual, but I do think cash is great because cash is king, and that's what pays your bills. But I do think it's always good for the founder to know what the accrual basis looks like, because that's matching your revenue with your expenses, and you can really see, am I really making money, or am I fooling myself here? So. I encourage people to take a good hard look at their accrual-based accounting and to move to that. Yes, for tax purposes, you can be cash, but to take a look at that to ensure that you understand what your costs and what are matched to your revenues.
Yeah, one of the first things that we do almost every time is accrual. If it's not accrual, we go to accrual, because we need to understand the profitability on every given month, not you got paid a bunch. Great, you're very profitable in January, but you're not in February, but you're working just as hard, and it doesn't make any sense that, your profitability doesn't typically go up and down that dramatically. Your cash does. So accrual's the way to go very early on.
In the back? Yeah. My question's about skill set and background as it applies to the financial function. We build a medical product, we manufacture it, and then we sell and bill it to insurance companies. Those are two very different financial processes. How do you think about a CFO's background as it applies to an industry or company?
I'll take this one. I'm also part of the business development team. So one of the, I'll say, top 3 things that I'm trying to do is finding that perfect match. So there's a personality difference as well. Sometimes a CEO is going to feel more comfortable with a creative versus a quant kind of person. But to your piece, I think I've lost my train of thought. Hold on. I just went to quant, and I'm like, did I say something wrong with someone? Go ahead. There's something going on, too, an alarm going off. Good. Okay.
So the question around the skill set of what you're looking for in with those types of the insurance billing versus the manufacturing and things like that.
Versus manufacturing backgrounds would be very different.
Yeah, certainly a lot of accounting it transfers over, debits are on the left and credits are on the right, and that's pretty standard. But there are, having somebody on your team with some SaaS experience, if that's what the kind of company you have, does matter in a lot of cases. Maybe it's at the controller level rather than the CFO, depending upon where you're at from a tactical versus strategic level. But yeah, generally we try to we hire people with pretty diverse backgrounds so that we can place people into a situation where they bring a lot of subject matter industry expertise to the table.
I'd say about 80% of the time I want to match the industry. I want the CFO to have that kind of experience. And there's about 20% where it's actually a disadvantage because I'm a fractional CFO for a media publishing organization. Never had that in the 15 years that I've been a CFO. But fresh pair of eyes, that industry is moving way faster than the executives can change. And so a fresh pair of eyes is actually the most appropriate piece there.
A couple times I've been surprised where a potential client says, I actually want somebody who does not have this industry experience because we want the fresh set of eyes.
Because maybe they're really heavy on that experience, but they're not on other elements. So, great question. Yeah.
The explosion of platforms like Pilot and Paro and these other tools, they're really cutting the cost of bookkeeping, and they're moving it to offshore, save a lot of money, particularly for an early stage company where you really can't afford $60, $80 an hour for bookkeeping, which is kind of in the city kind of rate, right? How are you integrating those platforms into what you do? Because they're really getting fast adoption across the startup environment.
I'll not talk about those platforms, but just from a founder's seat of like, sometimes I think it is, sorry Dan, like too early to bring in a company like Ascent. Like I think for us early on, we just also dabbled with like one of those companies. And I think you reach a certain stage where, and I can't speak to them utilizing them, but like you reach a certain stage where like that's not enough for what you need in terms of the strategic level. But I think like from a founder's seat, I will say sometimes it is like almost too early to bring in like that high level of view, because sometimes you just need to hit the ground running and like get product market fit and do it yourself. So like I do think there is a really great space for that tool, and for a lot of early stage people, like you do have tight budgets, so like know where you want to spend your money, just don't overlook this piece. But I think those are good for really early stage in my experience, but I don't know how y'all utilize them.
Yeah, we really don't integrate with those with a company like Pilot necessarily. I've seen some come and go like that. Scale Factor came and went, and other companies like that who have tried to automate it behind the scenes and things like that. But there tends to be some cleanup. But I think in the early stage, when you're really preserving your cash, it's worth exploring it. But realize there may be some cleanup when it comes time to get serious about raising around and making sure your books are truly GAAP basis.
I've seen, most of the time I'm cleaning up on some of the, especially the offshore elements, and it's fine for a year or two to do that, but at some point when you want to get serious, you really want to know your profitability, you really want to raise money, or you really want an exit, I don't even use those. We will find something that's more scalable than that.
We have a question here.
What about, you guys work with nonprofits where we're not looking to make cases for investors, but for grants or for community impact, and that's our goal?
Yeah, definitely. We've worked with, I think we have probably 5 or 6 nonprofit clients right now, in various degrees of where they're at in their growth cycle and grant writing, grant raising cycle for sure.
And social impact companies as well that are not nonprofit, but B Corps, absolutely.
Yeah, another question, which I think was an extension of hers, of this evolution of your financial team over time. You guys run the whole stack, but when does it make sense to have a full-time internal hire, and how does your fractional team work with them?
We come across that a lot. We find that as you hit a certain level of transaction, our model kind of breaks at about 25 hours a week. Once you're substantially more than half time using a fractional CFO or fractional any level, that's usually the tipping point that says you should probably get somebody full-time in that role. We find you'd kind of build from the bottom up. Probably the first internal hire is probably an accounting manager or a senior accountant once you reach that kind of inflection point. What we found as at the CFO level, we stay fractional up until companies that are 50, 60, $80 million in revenue, depending upon the transaction complexity and or the transaction volume of the company.
Yeah, I think 25 hours is that break-even point. That's a good rule for them. And we didn't answer your question, the other part, which is how do we transition? And we have profound professionals that are set up to transfer the work when the time is right. So document procedures, policies. It's not leaving with the folks. It's really it's responsible to be set up that way. So we do it. Everybody on our teams know that these are short-term engagements. I think our average is around 16 months or 18 months with clients. And that'll go from anywhere from 6 months to 6 years, but 18 months is about the average.
We'll actually help clients recruit as well when they need help. We've got a
I'm doing that right now.
Recruiter
Yeah.
On our team, which is right over there, and and so there'll come a time like, yeah, this is the time. You now should get this. This role should be full time. If you want some help, we can help you recruit for somebody to fill that role and train them and bring them up to speed. We actually really prefer to interview when it's time for that, because if we're going to stay in the role as a fractional CFO and or a controller, we want to make sure that we're going to work well with, that person's going to work well with us.
Yep. I spent last Friday 9 hours in interviews for a VP of finance role for one of my clients. So, and I love being in that spot because I know what they need. I know what questions to ask because finance people know finance people. I could never interview an engineer and wonder if they're going to do all right or not. But put me in front of an accountant in finance, I'll know in 5 minutes. Yeah.
What are your guys' kind of ideal client look like in that reason? If they're looking to amount and say this might be a good fit for us, obviously that's somewhat flexible. If you are looking for lower amounts of funding, is that something that would trigger trying to push out the board? And what does that look like for your guys' first after
It depends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're figuring out product market fit and you're at that point when you are ready to raise that capital and you're seeing that revenue getting close to being able to scale, that's probably the right time. Kind of similar to the question that was asked earlier.
It's not necessarily just the revenue, because if it was a SaaS model, it can be 3 or 4 million, and it's time for a fractional CFO, maybe even before then. Yeah.
And I think we brought in Ascent. Well, we brought in just an accountant first to help clean up the books, and we were at run around $1 million a year, and then we're reaching that, and then we brought Paul in a actual fractional CFO later. So we didn't start with both because we didn't need the fractional CFO yet, and so we were right around starting to. I think product market fit is better than a number which is hard to know what that is, but yeah.
And it depends on the capital fundraising requirements.
Yeah, we didn't have any. Yeah, so that's different, but.
Yeah, another example, I just interviewed a prospect last week. He's just reached $1 million after founding his company after 3 years. It's an engineering company in Montrose, 7 engineers, and he just says, I just need someone to talk to that gets me, and that I need a hat. This is what he said, I need to take some hats off. That's what he needed to do. And he's like, I'm a math guy. He's an engineer, so I know how to do it, but I just can't do it at all. And he doesn't like it, so that gives, if he likes the finance and accounting, it's great. Then maybe he'll hire a fractional COO or CMO or something. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
When does it make sense to start looking at buy-side M&A? We're sort of in that early to growth stage, so just curious to see what sort of triggers you guys see when you start looking at buy-side opportunities. And the second question, Caroline, who were you acquired by?
Why don't you answer that, and then we can talk about the buy-side M&A.
Yeah, I really fumbled the ball there because I'm supposed to be promoting. But we were bought by a venue company. They own about 70 venues across the U.S., and it's called Wedgwood Weddings.
I'm going to give you an example on the buy-side piece. That's an interesting question. So specifically for my client or one of my clients, they're at a 5% EBITDA margin. And this is the publishing company. That's not a safe margin in that kind of industry that's still changing, that AI is disrupting. We just don't know where it's going. Tons of print going to digital. that's a major change, and 5% is not enough. So we're gonna acquire one of our competitors, and that'll get us into like the low teens in terms of EBITDA margin. That's safe for me as a CFO. That feels right, and that's what I'm consulting and advising my CEO. But I don't know if there's a hard and fast answer. You want to give more details around it, or?
Yeah, well, that just sounds like cost synergies at back office more than.
It's revenue synergies as well, but cost is what we're starting with. Yeah.
One of my clients, it was actually an opportunistic. It was geographic. We purchased a company in Singapore, and it was just purely geography. They wanted that APAC presence more fully than they had, so that was what we did. So it really is kind of opportunistic sometimes too.
Only have a couple more minutes, and then we'll break, and you can all come up and ask individual questions. But anybody else have some other questions that make sense for everyone? Yeah, all the way in the back.
Yeah, how do y'all work with banks in terms of, how do you couch the raising funds, either debt or equity, with clients?
I'll speak, but I think this is good for everyone. Banks are finicky. I have a lot of relationship with banks, and every bank seems like this is how it was just described to me 2 days ago by someone. When a bank does a big commercial real estate deal for someone, they aren't able to do commercial real estate for the rest of the year because then they're out of balance with their assets. So, knowing that, it's important to just have a lot of relationship with banks in a lot of different locations and just focus areas, because you just never know. And I'm raising money for another client, and I'm taking a shotgun approach, and I don't want to, but I also don't want to go down with just two and then one, and then they also know that they're the only game in town, and banks are capitalists, unfortunately. So they may take advantage of that, and I prefer that we would have a lot more leverage when we're talking about terms.
So I have a client where we're looking at interviewing investment bankers to lead a raise. So I would just integrate with that process, right? I would put together the data room and do all the internal stuff and basically support the bankers. And there are other cases where we're putting everything together and the CEO may or may not have connections, so we're just supporting that, CEO going out to their network. So it can work either way from an intermediary investment banking perspective.
Answer your question? Are you a banker?
Yes, I am.
Did I offend you?
No.
Okay.
No, it's they are finicky, can be finicky. Some of them can, definitely. I was really referring to more the traditional commercial bank as opposed to the investment bank, which is more equity raise side. But I'm mostly we're debt. But SBA is huge right now. So
that's great. I was going to actually say that if you're into SBA 7A, please come see me afterwards. Yeah. But I am interviewing other banks. Yeah. Great. Last question, anyone? Got it.
Did anybody from Ascent utilize Wedfuly as far as the wedding planner?
Yes, John did.
John.
Yeah, someone from the Ascent team got married and had Wedfuly.
We did.
Well, and that's like a really good segue. I mean, just like to cap it all off, I think for all the founders out there, really you get to problem solve with them, which is really fun. I think Cindy and I would sit on calls and be like, we didn't know. But by the end of the call, we'd dig into the numbers and be like, oh, okay, this makes sense. So it's a real fun puzzle to work through together. You weren't doing that. We couldn't just throw the ball to them and be like, take it. It's a fun thing to do together. And then for investor conversations, but especially Shark Tank, I think part of the reason I did show up so well on there was I knew my numbers so well. Just because I had a fractional CFO firm didn't mean I didn't know the inner workings of everything. I really knew the numbers, and so I think they just empowered me to do that. Instead of taking it off my plate, they empowered me to be a better founder in that light.
Love that, 100%.
I hope that this 1 hour session didn't feel like an hour, but felt like 10 minutes, and it was exciting, and it was like not boring, and it wasn't all about accounting. But if it was, I'm sorry. And but we love it. We love what we do, and a lot of respect for people who are in the fractional CFO world, because you don't make it long if you're not good. You get pretty quick. You get feedback faster than you've ever gotten it before, and you grow a lot. So it just much respect for you too, Jodi. Right, you've 5 years with Ascent. Congratulations, fantastic. Thank you, panel. Thank you for your time, everyone, and please come on by.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.